Tonight, the trapped Chilean miners. Engineers are now lining the rescue shaft with steel in the hope they can start pulling the men out in just a few days. I'm Russ Mitchell. Also tonight, a rare look inside North Korea, the military parades, and the public appearance of the likely leader in waiting. Pot proposition. Could legalizing marijuana help pull the state of California out of its budget problems? And how do you get young people interested in great books? Make it short.
This is the CBS Evening News with Russ Mitchell.
And good evening. There is good news tonight for those Chilean miners who have been trapped for 67 days. They could be pulled to safety by midweek. The completed rescue shaft is getting some crucial reinforcement, and engineers are testing everything out before the most complicated part begins, the actual rescue. Seth Doan is at the San Jose mine tonight. Seth, good evening.
Good evening, Russ. Mine officials here have been very clear with us, pointing out, almost emphasizing, that the risk involved with this rescue operation is still far from over. And late last night, engineers here made the difficult decision of determining just how much of that rescue shaft to line with a protective casing. These giant pieces of steel casing were hoisted into position. They're being welded together and lowered into the rescue shaft to reinforce the walls. The process should take about a day and a half. Here's how it works. Rescuers are inserting 16 metal tubes, each about the length of a school bus, into the first 315 feet of tunnel. That part of the rock is the most jagged and unstable. Then there's a slight bend in the shaft before it turns into harder rock for the rest of the descent into the mine. Near the entrance to the mine at Camp Hope, relatives also prepare for a possible Wednesday rescue. But here they're getting ready in very different ways. The girlfriend of one miner received a wedding veil today. She plans to be a bride when her boyfriend is lifted from the mine, while the mother of another miner prepares for her next phase. There will be 2 births at the same time, she said. My son being born from the earth, and my grandchild who is coming into the world. In Copiapó, about an hour drive from the mine, the talk at the Sunday market is about the rescue. It hit everyone, Jenny Guzman told me. Most of us have miners in our families, neighbors, friends, cousins. We've all been touched by it. But it hit Pedro Legues particularly close. His nephew is Jimmy Sanchez. Just 19 years old, he's the youngest of the trapped miners. You're here selling boots, trying to make a living. Do you want to be at the mine? Do you wish that you could be up there, spend more time there? Sure I do, but I need to work to support my family, he told me. But I'm thinking about them even while I'm working. And work goes on at the mine. Here they're beginning to stage mock rescues to test out the capsule before any of the trapped miners get in. Now, if the process of casing the hull moves forward as planned, the next step will be for engineers to install a system of levers and pulleys so that they can raise and lower that rescue capsule. That process should take about a day and a half, which is why they are predicting a Wednesday rescue. Russ?
Seth, are the miners doing anything to prepare for this rescue attempt on Wednesday?
Well, we heard today that they are doing pretty well, according to the Minister of Health. They are also planning to fast about 6 hours before the rescue process is set to begin. That's so as they are raised up in that rescue capsule, they won't feel nauseous, as it has a tendency to spin, we're told. Russ?
I see. Seth Doan of the San Jose mine in Chile. Thank you so much. In North Korea today, a huge celebration in the capital of Pyongyang, marking the 65th anniversary of the founding of the communist nation. But the big news was the appearance of the man who could be the country's next leader. National correspondent Jim Axelrod has had extraordinary access and is with us now from Pyongyang. Jim.
Well, Russ, maybe the most surprising thing about the celebration was the North Korean government's decision to invite foreign reporters in to cover it. But there's a reason. The precision marching of North Korean troops and the display of its arsenal of weapons were part of the largest parade in the nation's history, according to a government spokesman. 16,000 troops will parade through Kim Il-sung Square here in Pyongyang, the climax to a weekend of high pageantry and drama, designed to send an important symbolic message about North Korea's future. Presiding over all of it, North Korea's dear leader, the 68-year-old Kim Jong-il, the son of North Korea's first ruler, Kim Il-sung. Kim Jong-il had a stroke 2 years ago, which raised questions about who would succeed him. Today, he was joined for the first time in the reviewing box by his son, Kim Jong-un.
It also means that the regime is planning to survive long term and certainly is doing everything they can to keep power within the current ruling regime.
Not much is known about Kim Jong-un. He is thought to be in his late 20s, educated for a year or two in Switzerland, and made a general 2 weeks ago by his father.
I think that the family or the ruling regime is trying to manage this transition over a period of a couple of years. So they're trying to slowly begin to give him a higher profile, but they're taking their time.
At the parade today and a music and dance extravaganza last night, Kim Jong-il's very presence drew tears from the faithful. But in a closed society like North Korea's, with a wretched economy and brutal poverty, it is impossible to know how widely those feelings are shared.
Kim Jong-il has less respect than his father Kim Il-sung did, and Kim Jong-un has basically none at all. This is a very challenging situation for the North Korean regime.
If Kim Jong-un takes over eventually, it would be the third member of the Kim family to rule North Korea, the first three-generation dynastic succession in a communist country. Russ?
Jim, from what you're seeing, from what you're feeling, how do you think the North Koreans are viewing America these days?
Well, I think that was written very clearly on the side of some of those missiles that you saw going through the square. Two things: defeat the U.S. military. That was written on some of the weaponry. And also we saw U.S. soldiers are Korean People's Army's enemy. So I think the feelings were quite clear. Russ?
Right. Jim Axelrod in Pyongyang. Thank you so much. In China, the wife of an imprisoned Nobel Peace Prize winner was allowed to visit her husband today. The democracy campaigner Liu Xiaobo was in tears when he said he was dedicating the award to those killed in the Tiananmen Square uprising 21 years ago. Back home, it was a day of political counterpunching as Election Day draws near. President Obama hit the road to rally support, while back in Washington, the fighting words were about big money campaign advertising. Senior White House correspondent Bill Plant is with the president in Philadelphia.
President Obama and his team hope big rallies like today's will rekindle the passion that propelled Democrats to victory in 2008.
Hello, Philadelphia!
But the polls say most of the enthusiasm this year is on the Republican side, so Democrats are also on the attack. This new ad from the Democratic National Committee alleges that Republican consultants Karl Rove and Ed Gillespie and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce are accepting secret donations from overseas.
They're stealing our democracy, spending millions from secret donors to elect Republicans to do their bidding in Congress.
The Chamber of Commerce called the claims ridiculous and false and said the $100,000 it receives from overseas affiliates isn't used for political campaigning, which would be illegal. On Face the Nation, presidential counselor David Axelrod offered no proof of any wrongdoing, but said he's still skeptical.
We now see tens of millions of dollars being spent by the Chamber and a number of organizations, some of which just cropped up. Ed Gillespie and Karl Rove run one of them. Why not simply disclose where this money is coming from?
Rove and Gillespie called the ad and Axelrod's question a political ploy.
David Axelrod is either woefully uninformed or willfully deceptive.
This is a desperate and I think disturbing trend by the President of the United States to tar his political adversaries with some kind of, enemies list with being unrestrained by any facts or evidence whatsoever.
But the president today continued to hammer unlimited election spending without disclosure by certain groups, permitted now by a recent Supreme Court decision.
The American people deserve to know who's trying to sway their elections. And you can't stand by and let special interests drown out the voices of the American people.
Rallies like this may be good for getting Democrats to the polls, but where the president will be spending most of his time over the next several weeks is raising money, and lots of it. Russ?
Bill Plant with the president in Philadelphia. Thanks. The Supreme Court this week hears the appeal of a Texas death row inmate in a landmark case. The prisoner wants to use federal civil rights law to force DNA testing he hopes will clear him. The case has far-reaching implications. as we hear from Chief Legal Correspondent Jan Crawford.
The crime was brutal. On New Year's Eve 1993, Twyla Busby was strangled in her Texas home and bludgeoned to death. Her 2 adult sons, both mentally challenged, were stabbed. Henry Skinner, Busby's boyfriend, was found covered in her blood. He was convicted of triple homicide. His punishment, death.
The state of Texas is trying to kill me for something I didn't do. So
Skinner says DNA from the crime scene will show another man committed the murders. But for the past decade, Texas prosecutors have refused to turn it over. Courts have backed up the prosecutors, ruling the evidence would not exonerate him because his own DNA puts him at the scene.
Is Henry Skinner, in your view, innocent?
There's no chance that Henry Skinner is innocent.
So Skinner took an extreme step. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the district attorney, claiming he's entitled to have evidence tested for someone else's DNA. Now the Supreme Court will decide if Skinner can sue.
It's an individual who has had 6, 7, 8 bites at the apple and is now unhappy that he's never gotten relief and wants the court to create for him yet another bite at the apple.
In the past 20 years, 259 people convicted of crimes have been exonerated with DNA testing. Skinner's defenders say he too should get a chance.
Most people would say, why in the world wouldn't you do the test? How come we're having this big fight? Why has Mr. Skinner been in court for 10 years to get a simple DNA test done that could have been done in a matter of weeks?
Prosecutors say allowing convicted criminals to file civil rights lawsuits to undo their conviction would wreak havoc on the criminal justice system, possibly affecting tens of thousands of cases nationwide. Jan Crawford, CBS News, the Supreme Court.
Coming up on tonight's CBS Evening News, the stakes are high for California voters in the debates over legalizing marijuana. In addition to picking a new governor, Californians next month will also decide if their state will be the first to legalize marijuana for recreational use. Even if Proposition 19 passes, the federal government almost certainly will challenge it. Bill Whitaker reports.
Oakland's Oaksterdam University is all about one thing, marijuana. For students learning the finer points of pot production and cultivation, the timing couldn't be better.
I have high aspirations for this industry and where it's going to go.
Proposition 19 would allow adults 21 and older to grow marijuana at home and possess up to an ounce for personal use. Individual cities would be free to regulate and tax sales.
We have a whole new economy that can flourish here in California around cannabis.
Proponents argue that marijuana sales could haul in $1.4 billion in tax revenues. That's a major reason why one of the state's largest unions has endorsed legalization. The California chapter of the NAACP is behind it too, along with at least 2 former big city police chiefs.
It diverts the police from their primary duty to protect life and property. People are not terrified about pot smoking in their neighborhood.
California has long been on the cutting edge when it comes to pot. 14 years ago, voters approved the use of medical marijuana. And recently, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger relaxed penalties for pot possession. But even though he famously inhaled as a bodybuilder, Schwarzenegger says Proposition 19 would turn the state into a laughingstock. And, believe it or not, the measure has sparked high anxiety at some medical marijuana shops.
We are not sure what our business will look like post-Prop 19.
For employers, the law could create a giant headache. Employees couldn't be fired for smoking pot unless employers prove the drug-impaired job performance.
So it does open the door for the ability of employees to smoke pot at work.
Would you like to legalize marijuana?
Even if it passes, pot would still be illegal under federal drug laws. So it's likely Prop 19 will be challenged in court, which means the whole controversial issue could just go up in smoke. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, developing a taste for books in bites that last 60 seconds. Can you teach an epic novel in 60 seconds? Well, a Boston woman has been using a website for 1-minute video recaps of the classics of literature. It is not meant to be a substitute for the real thing, but as an enticement, as we hear from Manny Gallegos.
Don't expect another Charlotte's Web.
Jenny Sawyer is talking about George Orwell's dark novel Animal Farm.
Overworked, underappreciated animals dream of a revolution.
It's her summary of a classic posted on the internet.
Did I mention that this book doesn't have a happy ending?
Sawyer is the creator of 60-Second Recap, a website to guide teens through literature.
If literature is sort of this like sheer cliff, it gives people handholds so they feel like, okay, I can get through this, like I start to understand maybe who some of the characters are, I feel like I can relate to them a little bit more, then I actually want to read the book.
A former book reviewer and English major, Sawyer tries to inspire young readers.
To make them feel like it's not just, a stupid homework assignment that they have to do because they have to get good grades because they have to get into college to get a good job.
The recaps are taped in a Boston studio.
This is To Kill a Mockingbird.
On this day, breaking down Harper Lee's Southern tale of race and coming of age.
It's about how to overcome prejudice and injustice.
So far, Sawyer has recapped 31 familiar titles, from The Great Gatsby,
Saturday Night at Gatsby's, Nick, the new neighbor, just wants in,
to Jane Eyre.
Feminism, Jane doesn't just want to be his possession.
And of course, Shakespeare.
Betrayal is King Lear's main theme. Out, vile jelly!
The creators of 60-Second Recap insist the videos are not a substitute for reading, not a way for the YouTube generation to cheat.
Who can help me out, Devrin?
In fact, many teachers consider it a tool.
Absolutely a conversation starter, because it gives both them and myself a jump-off point to start talking about the characters in the book, the plot of the book.
What happened that night, Oedipus? They say I murdered my father.
60-Second Recap has had 4.5 million hits.
In our world, and in Huxley's, success is measured by economic growth and prosperity.
In this brave new world of constant distraction, Sawyer is keeping the value of books alive. Manuel Gallegos, CBS News, New York.
We'll be back. And now a familiar parent-teenager conversation, but this one's from outer space. When American astronaut Scott Kelly joined the orbiting space station, one of the first calls he got was from his teenage daughter Samantha, who was celebrating her birthday.
Can I have an iPhone so I can keep up with your trip?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
And now we want to tell you about a bouncing baby who weighed in at 350 pounds. The little one is a killer whale born yesterday at Orlando's SeaWorld. Mom and baby are both reportedly doing well. No name yet. In fact, no one really knows if it's a bouncing baby boy or bouncing baby girl. Grammy winner and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame soul singer Solomon Burke died today at the airport in Amsterdam. He was 70 years old. His Everybody Needs Somebody to Love was recorded by the Rolling Stones. And another, Cry to Me, was heard in the movie Dirty Dancing. It is October 10th, 2010. 10-10-10. That only happens once a century. And it turns out it's a date that has special meaning for couples everywhere, and they're celebrating today, shooting for a perfect 10. Cynthia Bowers has their story.
In Las Vegas, where gamblers live and die by numbers, hundreds of couples are rolling the dice and betting that 10-10-10 adds up to one happy marriage.
I'm going to propose or repropose to my wife.
Even performer Donny Osmond cashed in on the cachet of the once-in-a-century date and got into the act, hosting 10 couples in a group proposal ceremony.
Will you marry me? Yeah, baby!
A romantic photo op, but not even close to the more than 7,000 couples who tied the knot today at the aptly named World Unification Church in South Korea. In Brooklyn, self-confessed numbers fanatic Mo Massoud is marrying tonight. He planned for a date he considers lucky, not surprising for a guy nicknamed Five.
Believe it or not, years and years ago, I've always hoped that this would be the day.
According to Brides magazine, and who should know better, 31,050 U.S. couples chose to get married on 10-10-10. That's almost twice the number of weddings on any other day during the month and 10 times as many as a typical Sunday. But it's not just about luck or even dumb luck for Mark and Amanda Moore, who got married in Apex, North Carolina at 10:10 this morning.
I'm a little older, so it helped me remember my anniversary.
As for the newly engaged who also want a day to remember, there are two similar dates coming up, 11/11/11 and 12/12/12.
Your fiancé.
Cynthia Bowers, CBS News, Chicago.
And that's the CBS Evening News on this historic Sunday. I'm Russ Mitchell in New York. Good night.